Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Cabinet meeting of the 10th of December. I have two apologies for absence, both due to illness, Councillors Mike Hallam and Fiona Baker. So we wish them a very swift recovery from their ailments. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members of Cabinet have any interest to declare on any item on the agenda? Nope, thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting of the 19th of November 2024. Is Cabinet happy that I accept those minutes as a true and accurate record of the meeting? Agreed, thank you. I've been notified of no urgent business under item 4, so we'll move on to item 5, which is Chair's announcements, and only to say that obviously we have a strong focus on the financial side of the Council this evening, which Councillor Longley will be taking us through in some detail, and I hope members will pay great detail to what's sometimes an overlooked part of council life and council scrutiny. We, of course, we have our Chair of Corporate Scrutiny with us this evening as well. I know that he'll manage a full and thorough process of budget scrutiny in the weeks and months ahead of us. So without much further ado, we'll go straight to Councillor Longley for, item 6 is report from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We don't have anything notified to us, but Councillor McCord is indicating that he wishes to speak.
Evening, Adam. You ought to have, because this was a point I think I raised at Council, that we make recommendations and agree reports at scrutiny that then seem to get lost somewhere in the sausage machine. And I'm particularly thinking about the one where Jane, we had the events report. When was that? September? Yeah. So it still hasn't managed to get through from us to here. So I don't know where that is, but we did make a number of recommendations around the party in the park. I can't remember what we called it. We had an interesting suggestion, one of our members, to turn it into like an agricultural show, and Jane volunteered to judge best in show, but
Okay, well, we look forward to having that recommendation before us.
I don't think that one made the cut, or at least I hope it never made the cut. But it was a suggestion that was made, but I don't know where it's gone. Well, I won't hold you up because it could be a long meeting.
Well, may I just advertise the fact that we do, of course, have the fantastic Blakesley Show as an annual event in West Northamptonshire, which is well worth a visit, independent of West Northampton Council. But Jane, who's the Director of Communities and Opportunities, may like to just clarify the status of that report.
Yes, so we have a slot on the January corporate scrutiny to come back and talk through all the recommendations and the action that's been taken on them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCord. Over to Councillor Longley then for item 7, which is the Revenue Monitoring Period 7 report.
Thank you, Chair. The easiest way to explain this, I think, probably is to turn to page 18, which is table 1, which is the summary. And hopefully you're all familiar with this. It's the one I use it whenever I get the opportunity. And the situation has gone from period 4 to period 7, and it's a small increase in the overspend from 3.8 to 4. And that's primarily brought about, if you look in the last but one column, movement since period 4, you'll see that pretty much everybody, every department there is slightly to the better. Now bear in mind that brackets are good, non-brackets are not. And what we've had an interesting situation with the Children's Trust, which has been stable for 3 months, I think is right in saying. And then we've had this sudden uplift on some placements, primarily of 1.356. That's been broadly offset by all the other items you can see, sort of chief exec and so forth. And probably the most satisfying one of the lot is probably the 151 on the adults. So it's been a big overspend so far, but that seems to have stabilized. So the net impact is that we're looking at a year end at the moment of an overspend of 4 million. Now, I'm not unduly concerned by that at this stage, because you don't, but we'll looking really to make sure we don't get anything coming down the track of significance in the last quarter. Ordinarily, you would expect the last quarter to be better. We'll see, but that's where it stands at the moment. So that's we'll leave that at that one. I think there's not really very much else to add other than say just highlight the children's and the adults, and everything else is pretty much looking okay. Now, I'm not going to go through each one in detail. Anybody's got any particular questions they want to come back on that, that's very welcome to do so. And I think that what you've probably on page 25, I'll point out that what we have done has utilised the 10 million contingency that was put in, and that was used some time in the past. So that's gone, and and that's the situation. Moving on, if you look to page 27, we look at the HRA forecast outturn. That's showing a small overspend at the year end is the forecast, but we'll be looking to bring that back in line. I would hope to think in that timescale. So nothing in the financial terms to report of any significance on the HRA. The direct dedicated schools grant, that's always an interesting one to say the least, and that's on page 28, the table 3. And the significant point there is on the high needs block, the 12.847 in the far right column. That's a very, very significant overspend in that area. And now we expect that to carry on during the rest of this year. The final point I would probably make here, no, not the final point, but one of the points I make is the funding. Table 5 on page 31, fairly straightforward, but that comes from 414 million. That's the net number, don't forget, not the gross number. And then I think the other thing of interest that usually gets picked up is on table 6, page 32, which is shows the savings proposal. And now you've got to sort of bear in mind, and it'll come up again when we start talking about the medium-term plan and also next year's budget, is this savings proposals, or productivity as I like to call it, is what offsets the increasing demands that we get from particularly adults and children. Without these cost-saving arrangements, we would be in serious trouble. We're not, because we're delivering the majority of them. At the moment, of the 24 million that's predicted, we're 1.3 still short in red. The others look as if they're going to come home. So, I think that's a very good performance. I'd like to think so. It's good to the staff. But as I say, that's a very necessary requirement to offset the increasing demands. And there's a lot of detail to follow up, which you're all very welcome to do so. Other than that, Chair, I think that's a very brief summary of period 7 outlook. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. And you mentioned those cost savings in year. I think it just goes to demonstrate that whilst we have the draft budget for next year on the agenda tonight, it's not just about setting a budget, it's then about managing that budget in year. And it's an active piece of work by all members of the Cabinet, but particularly Councillor Longley as the Cabinet Member for Finance. Now, we do have 3 councillors registered to speak. I'm aware that Councillor Holland-Delamere is burning the local government candle at both ends tonight. He's currently at a pensions fund committee meeting in Northampton. So we've just got councillors Purser and Randall with us for this item registered to speak. So Bob.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we're doing anything different to what we usually do, because just reading through the report, it's pretty much the same going forward, like we've seen last year, the year before, the year before. What are we doing significantly to change so as we're not continuously chasing our tails all the time? Because I don't see any new initiatives coming forward, ways that we can change really doing things. So I just wondered what new initiatives there were coming forward, really, because I don't see much in that report. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Wendy. There's about £24 million worth of cost reductions, and then and without impacting on services. That's a key point here. And I think if you look into next year's budget as well, which I'll come to, there's a major step forward there on AI, which I'll talk about later. I won't touch with it now. But there's a lot of activities going on, and things like, I mean, just quote a few examples off the top of my head. I mean, the housing for children, the housing for adults, things of that nature. A lot of initiatives, great many. In fact, if you look at here, a lot of them are detailed in these reports. So I think it's I think our staff here are doing pretty well on that side, and I'd be the first to say if I didn't think they were.
Just coming back on that, you say, you know, the services are staying there. That's not what the public perception is out there. They're not saying the services are maintaining themselves. They can't even get through on the telephone. And, you know, we are seeing a lot of these budget holes are staff vacancies that haven't been filled. And if they're there and they haven't been filled, how can we be working effectively? You know, that is my point. We just can't keep slimming off staff all the time. And you know, public perception isn't that our services are maintaining. That's not what they thought we were going to get when we get West Northants Council. So I'm getting a lot of members of public complaining. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Purser has passed on his speaking slot, so it's over to you, Malcolm.
And thanks, Chair. Well, we're on to the item 8 here now.
No, sorry, Councillor Longley, to respond to those comments from Councillor Randall on job vacancies, and then we need to vote on the recommendations before we move on.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, all I can say is the number of people employed over the last 18 months has increased by 184. So it's not a reduction; it's 10 a month.
Thank you. We've got 5 recommendations at paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. And now, Councillor Longley, you can go to item 8.
Thank you, Chair. Right. Well, this report here is an unusual one in that it's really all about change, because a lot of the capital, you're all very well, hopefully I say every time, so I'm sure you're all very well aware. Look at 5.1, it talks about the very well-established procedures we've got for capital to the Capital and Assets Board, and that's worked extremely well, I'd like to think, and we control the borrowings very carefully such that we can invest where we think it's appropriate, and there's a very, I won't go through the various levels of, and I've done that before, but so what you're looking at this report more than anything else is the changes that are taking place, because a lot of the capital, of course, rolls from one year to the other, and I think if there is one item that comes out of this, it's the very significant capital investments we're making, and I refer back to the sort of as the 2 obvious examples I've just used is the houses. And a lot of the IT systems we're putting in. So I really would I not go any further than that on this one, I don't think, Chair, because it's a lot of detail, and everybody has their own interest in various capital proposals. And I think it's probably more likely that people be interested in the various projects than they are in the overall arrangements, because they're quite clearly laid out here. But a lot of it. So I'm going to leave it there tonight, I think. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. We've got, again, Councillors Purser and Randall to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it best to not duplicate my comments by sort of repeating them, and just can I start by thanking Martin for his briefing last week, very patiently went through the budget with me, which I'm very grateful for, because I'm slow in these things and usually have to have things explained again this year when he'd explained them last year. So appreciate that with him. And I think we've now got actually, and it's good that the budget process started earlier in the year, and I think we've got a robust process that looks pretty transparent to me, and I think that's good. And I think that will stand us in good stead for the future. So I think the process is good. The issue is about the devil is in the detail, and some of it is not that detailed really, because it is these big budget items and what on earth we can do about them. I'm just going to look at the three big issues, which seem to be housing, where we've got, and it seems to me that landlords are becoming more risk averse, and we're getting more vulnerable people needing housing, and we're probably it's probably the consequences of policy decisions made by government in about 2012 are actually impacting on our budget position today. So I can see this is going to be a problem that, if the current government gets it right, it will still take 5 years for it to have an impact on our budgetary position, going forward. So I think it is quite a difficult position as far as housing is concerned. I'm quite concerned about that. I think looking at the children's area of budget, which we seem to have problems with each year, I don't know whether the performance figures that we're seeing later on the agenda suggests that things might just be turning around a bit in terms of fewer numbers coming into the MASH. I don't know whether that is grounds for optimism, but it might, but somehow we've got to get to a point where these kind of very expensive placements get out, we find a way of managing them out of the system, because they are crippling us, I think, as an organisation. And I'm still struggling, and what Martin and I had a discussion about this, about can the early interventions, if we invested in early intervention stuff, will that actually have the consequence of impinging on the budget at the end of the day? That's the question I've got. Can we actually make prevention work? That is, I think, and are we investing enough in the prevention bit? I see the red light flashing, and I've got my third bit is the adult care bit. And that really, I think, until government gets a grip on this one, we're going to continue to be in trouble. And it's this whole area of people. I think there are two bits for the adult care budget. One is the under 65s and the other is the over 65s. And I think the issues are probably different there. But certainly as far as the over 65s, we've really got to find a way. This last 5 years of life is very expensive. And we haven't really got a plan of managing that and paying for that. And I think while that's there, it's going to make our budget here as an authority very, very difficult. So I think those are my gloomy comments on the budget. I didn't really intend it to be as gloomy as that.
Yeah, as Councillor McCall points out, I don't think you were speaking entirely to the capital monitoring.
Don't worry, we
report,
picked that up.
Don't worry. Your comments are noted nonetheless, Bob.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'll be commenting on that, Bob, a bit later. Stay, that's okay. The points are all good ones, Bob.
I mean, just in terms of preventative work and investment in the children's side of things, we've had a whole programme called Circle to Success, which is aimed at targeted early intervention or stage appropriate intervention, so that children don't go any further through the system than they need to. And so that will both meet the needs of the looked after child, and save the taxpayer money in the longer run. And it's proven to be very successful. How much is enough? is a huge question, and I don't think it's one that we'll ever be able to answer, but we do what we can, and it's, I believe it's starting to bear fruit, and we're seeing evidence of that. So, Wendy, are you passing on your speaking slot for the capital report? Okay. Any comments from, sorry, Councillor McCord?
Just a quick question on paragraph 8.4. We have a list of carry forwards and slippages. The biggest one being Overstone Leys Primary School, and another one being the new mortuary facility at 6 million and 2.5. But last week we had those on the agenda at full council. So why were we bothering to put forward an extra 2.2 million for Overstone Leys School if it wasn't going to start until the incoming financial year? We could have surely just wrapped that up in the budget. And likewise with the mortuary facility, we put money through there, albeit it might be slightly different, but there's little point in entering, well, unless I'm misunderstanding what we did last week, the deal we were going to be doing with the NHS for looking after the deceased coming out of the hospitals, well, they're going to need somewhere to go. So again, if the mortuary facility is slipping, I'm assuming that contract would have to slip because we wouldn't have a facility.
I'll look to the 151 officer for some clarity on that for me.
Yes, I think on through you, Chair, on any capital item, if we know there's going to be slippage, that's a different matter to do we need to correct the budget? And I think on both of those items that you've highlighted, we needed to correct the budget. If the timings work, we can wrap it up in when we set the budget for next year, for 25-26 for the capital programme. But at the time of taking those reports into council, we didn't expect that to be the case. We thought we needed to correct the budget in this financial year. We've then slipped forward some of that funding because we've had delays in those particular projects.
Thank you. Anything further from you, Malcolm?
I thought it was a very impressive answer.
Okay. Any further comments from Cabinet members? No. In which case, we've got two recommendations at paragraph 2 of the report. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on then to item 9, which is the 25-26 draft budget and medium-term financial plan. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, what we're looking for tonight is, of course, get the okay to go ahead for consultation. So then bear in mind that there are 2 items here that is worthy of significant note. The first one is that everybody's put in whatever they believe to be the correct numbers for the government input and so on and so forth. Now, that won't be clear. The clarity won't be there until the 19th of December. So a big caveat there that it's very much subject to what's received. We've put in what we believe to be the best shot, but that can change. The second thing is that there is, I'm bound to point out that there is one significant risk in the budget, and we will yet to be finalising that between now and the consultations finished, and that is in the AI input. There's a big AI project in there, and AI savings productivity project, and that's back to the transformation point I was talking to Wendy about a bit earlier on. So the nub of the budget is that it's 427.7 million, and that's the net position, as always, and that is the key numbers there is a 4.99% increase. You've all read that, I'm sure, and including the 2% adult social care. The recommendations, paragraph 3, I won't go through them all, because you all have read them. And that's the key to it. The other key point on there is, of course, the productivity that's required. And if you look at the proposals there, and we can move on to page 96 here now, that there's pay-related costs of 3.5 million included, contract inflation of 7.4, big numbers. Children's Trust, there's many paragraphs on that, with the contract sum for us is 100.5. And there's again, the big productivity issue there is, as Bob referred to, placements, absolutely correct. That's what Snooker's does every time. It's what Snooker's on the 1 million for period 7. And the approach to that is to buy the houses and set them up and have a situation where we control the costs. And you're very familiar with that program. And it won't manifest itself just yet, but it's coming on stream, and we should see a serious impact on that next year and the years beyond. So that I think is a very, very key point there. Similarly, you do mention adults care, and the same sort of approach is being taken there. And this is really because of the Capital and Assets Board works well in that regard, and sets a basic budget, and then the individual projects then go through in detail, and the business case is agreed upon or not. In the case may be, very rarely does it not. And that's down to very much it's controlling the borrowing, which has happened. So the other tricky ones, as you probably were too well aware, home to school transport, another major initiative on that, and temporary accommodation, another major initiative on that, which is in houses again. And all of these things will move in the right direction, but they are very necessary because all of these offset the increase in demand that we're having in pretty much across the board on these cases. So I think that the general contingency for next year put in at 9 million, not 10, no particular. So that's there or thereabouts the same. Hopefully we don't need it. And if you look across at the draft budget summary, that's page 102, 643. Now there's on the bottom line there's two quite important points there. This year's budget at 414.5 rises to 427.7, and that's just marginally less than 3.2% increase, which is, I guess you say that's more or less what we're expecting inflation to be. But the other important number there is the unavoidable budget pressures of 30.1 are offset mainly by the efficiencies in income generation, 26.2. That's the argument I was putting about productivity as a key. It's the only way we can offset this the situation of continuing an increased demand. And that's the manifestation of it, hopefully, will happen in next year's budget. There's lots of other comments on there. I shan't bore you all as those. I'll move on to the risks, reserves, and the general balance reserves. That's unchanged. We're keeping that at 35, well, just under 36 million. And that's and the risk reserve, which is the other important one, is similar. And so that's then of course all the specific reserves, they have a purpose and they will come and go as the purpose requires. So see no issues there. So the two important ones are those two top ones, and they are broadly the same. So moving on, there's another comment on the DSG block for next year. That's something that's the issue only here is one of allocation, not the amount. So we've not much you can do about that. And then we move on to the capital strategy, and that's really moving on to 844 as a table there that just gives you an idea of the scale of what's happening. And this is, I'm coming back again to, I was talking to Wendy about the investments that are being made. They're very substantial, and we're talking well over the 3-year period, 4-year period, 3-4-year period, 155 million. That's a very big number. The bulk of it being in the first year, 100 million is that. Now the question there will be, can we deliver on that in the time scale? But they'll all be good projects. They'll all have gone through the CAB board. They'll all have a business case. Nothing will go out without a business case. So we move on to page 119, which is the complete summary. All those that like charts, and that's the plan. Now, I'm not a great fan of the long-term 4 or 5 year predictions. It's good to give you an idea, but the reality is so much changes in that period of time. It usually bears not too much relation to the actual. So, but the next year and the year after, yeah, well, that's different. You've got to look at that very closely. And it shows a continuing situation whereby we're balancing, and that's what is key. Balancing with good investments, and it says good investments that have enabled us to balance the books these last 3 years, and hopefully that'll be the case in the future. So I think on that, Chair, I will leave it to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. We have 2 registered speakers, Councillor Purser and Councillor Randall. Councillor Randall, then.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there's too much to cover in a few minutes, obviously, but, you know, just a few things that I know will be spoken about out in the public arena. So, you know, what we're seeing is, again, council tax increase, social rent increase, another increase to garden waste, and now parking charges. We seem to have and parking charges is something that does upset people. And we seem to be spending a lot of money on ANPR cameras to get back a small amount of money. So I don't understand why we're spending 135,000 to only get back, I think it said 26,000 in year 1, and then it seemed to go down thereafter. So, I mean, there is one in Daventry, I believe, Primrose Hill Car Park. You're putting an ANPR camera in, but there is no parking charges showing. So does that mean you just want to, is that just for a parking ticket if they go over their time slot? And if that's the case, I have sent an email actually to Stuart this week about the Arc Cinema. They've expressed concerns that most of the films now go over 3 hours once you put in the trailer. And they've got real concerns that people are going to stop coming. And once that's in the public arena, you know, they're going to be even more concerned over that. Departments told to reduce unavoidable spending by 10%. So if it's unavoidable, how long can we keep cutting the unavoidable? You know, the only place, where do you cut that from? Just people? Or if it's unavoidable, surely you're spending it. And the capital, only 7 million for adult social care. And yet that's the one where we're significantly seeing those budget demands going up. So why aren't we investing a lot more in adult social care? Thank you.
Councillor McCord, did you want to comment on this item? Or?
Thank you. I think the first thing I want to do, and I'm sure Malcolm will agree, is to place on record my thanks to Martin and all of those people, what I refer to as the internal factory, that actually produce all the tables. And when we get to council, there'll be another 300 or 400 pages of appendices and various things. It does need a lot of work to check it. And I'm sure Martin will pass back thanks from the scrutiny side of things to everybody in the finance department for getting us another budget. And of course, thanks to Malcolm for the role he's doing in the political side. Most of the points I think that I wanted to raise in terms of where we'd probably be going at with scrutiny, I think Malcolm has sort of highlighted. They're almost self-selecting. Opening point on the contingency, you know, I admire your optimism that we won't need it, but I think history is against you there. So we probably do need to be, we do need to be thinking about that. Scrutiny will begin its work. I think we're meeting next week to try and thrash out where we're going to go. But certainly at our pre-budget briefings that we had, one of the things that we had already highlighted was the 5 million saving for the artificial intelligence. And we certainly did ask that we bring that to this planning and plotting meeting that we'll be doing in terms of what areas scrutiny wishes to go to, with some idea, because I believe there are some pilots that are due to deliver fruit or not very soon. So that is something that I think that scrutiny will be taking a big interest in, as to what that risk is. But I think there are areas, and there's certainly some areas where some intelligence applied, artificial or otherwise, would be very welcome. The DSG that was mentioned as well in the previous item in terms of budget monitoring, the 12.5, is that a roll-up figure, being sort of a couple of lots of 3 million from previous years? So where is our plan then to get our way out of it? Now, I know on this one there are many councils across the country. I think Bristol was one of them, where they're in deep, very deep on this one, 50, 60, 70 million, I think, and heading into threatening 114 territory if they can't balance the book. So it's another one where everybody's in the brown stuff. It's just the depth that varies, but nonetheless, we should have a plan to get our way out of that, and I don't necessarily see it. We then have the usual suspects of care. Now, we have corrected the adult budget, again, from what I can see, to take care of the 10 million that we're overspending this year. But we always seem to be perennially chasing our tail on that one, and always having to deal with in-year overspends of various sizes. So we might need to think about that. And then the Children's Trust, and that's the one that concerns me personally the most, because this year's budget, from what I can see, is 94.4. And next year's budget, or the one we're talking about, 25-26, is 95.9. So we're only going up by 1.4, yet we're currently reporting a 10 million overspend, which will be probably 6-7 million for this council. So I'm not quite sure how we end up with that, where if we're already looking at 10 million overspend and we haven't done much of a correction, how does that balance out? And then the the other big risk that I think we need to be very aware of is what is going to be the impact on this council with our suppliers. And I'm particularly thinking of suppliers in care, who are going to be hit with the NI increase. The real concern is that lowering of the threshold from 9 to 5, because that's going to add about £600 or £700 per person per job if you're in that sort of area. And a lot of those care workers doing 16, 17 hours a week are probably in that area. So although the government are saying, well, we'll compensate local government, I think by that what they mean is they will compensate our directly employed bin man who's directly employed from the Toaster depot, but they're not going to do it for the Veolia contracted bin man from the Northampton depot. And it'll not take too long, in my view, before those contractors will come in and say, our costs have gone up. What are you going to do about it, council? And particularly what you're going to do about it, council, whenever you've got your balances paid and we haven't had ours. So I think there's a massive risk for us, council, here that we need to think about. So it is, as you say, also roll on the 19th. And let's sort of see how much of the extra 40 billion raised in the budget is actually going to make its way into local government coffers. And I think, you know, there is a huge risk for this council, and particularly that NI side. So that is a concern, and we'll also be able to see how reliable or otherwise Martin's crystal ball is. But that's it's usually been pretty good in the past, but we'll see. So those are the only comments I want to make in terms of where we're going with this. But we'll no doubt kick it around over the next few weeks, and I'm sure we'll all be seeing a lot of each other in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCord. I know Councillor Golby's got a comment to make in response to the comments about the investment in adult social care.
Well, it was more of a general comment, really. I just wanted to add my thoughts to Councillor McCord's point around, you know, congratulating the staff and Martin's team on putting this together. It's been a a huge piece of work, and the complexities that we're dealing with, that we come to Cabinet with, you know, every month or so, how we've been able to incorporate them and absorb them, especially the pressures in social care, adults and children's, into what we've got before us, which is, of course, a budget set to go out for draft and for comment, and perhaps some adjustments when we come to it in February. But I just wanted to put on record what a really good piece of work, and we've all been involved as Cabinet members as well to get us to this point today. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to kind of respond a little bit to something Wendy said, Councillor Rendell said, and also Councillor Purser. I think just in terms of doing things differently, and your questions about demand into children's. So at the moment, the referrals into the MASH are not lower. However, the service is much more stable. So the numbers have not gone up in the way that they did. But I think I'd just like to kind of say, in terms of what we're doing different across particularly the 4 big demand areas, so children's, adults, housing, temporary accommodation, homeschool transport, is quite a consistent view. So first and foremost, can we genuinely, because you said, will prevention work? And I think the challenge we've got is prevention takes a long time to work. So we have to do multiple things. So the first thing is we're doing work across all of them around prevention. So how can we stop something escalating, particularly going back to the AI things, how can we predict somebody may be on the edge of something and act before it happens? Then there's the question of once they reach us, can we help them step down again, etc., or can we meet the need by technology, etc., by doing something different or planning better or making sure that what we spend is optimised in a good way. If they come into care, then there is an immediate issue, same with adults, but then we have to ask ourselves, can we step them down? And the Circle Success Programme that Adam was talking about absolutely looks to do that, because we all know, at the top end of a residential placement, £26,000 a week, a kinship award where somebody in the family cares for them is obviously thousands and thousands of pounds later and better for the child. So we try to do that as well. And then the other end of the scale is, if we are going to put them into placement, is how do we make it more cost effective, whether it's an adult or a child? And in all those cases, we're looking at what are the options in terms of the assets we've got, the land, we've got the builds we can do, partnerships we can do. So I think we are doing different things, but we're doing them across the piece, because I don't think we can rely on one intervention anymore. So it's just to provide that bit of reassurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just in terms of, I'll address the principle of how much we will invest as a capital investment. And in this case, adult social care, the political steer is very, very clear that where there's a saving to be generated by a capital investment, then we will absolutely loosen the purse strings and allow that capital investment to take place. But the ability to deliver a capital programme is finite, and so we will deliver what we can deliver within a single year. We may well come back, we hope, in this time next year with further capital investment in adult social services, subject to the capacity of the organisation and the business plan behind it and all the rest. So it's not a one-off; it's an ongoing project of capital investment. And we've got 7 million in the budget this year at this stage, because that's what we feel we can justify in terms of savings that will be generated and what we can actually deliver in terms of the project management of things. Of course, council tax and other fees and charges have to go up because of the financial constraints that we, along with all upper tier authorities in local government, face. And it's not just confined to upper tier authorities these days. I think it's interesting to note that a piece of work done by the County Councils Network found that by their analysis, the funding coming our way from central government is less than it would have been under the formula of the last government, simply because the incoming government has chosen to direct more funding towards metropolitan boroughs. They see those as higher areas of deprivation. However, we know full well that we face funding gaps. That's not a secret. It's in the mid-term financial plan, and we have to find a means to fill those funding gaps. This is our first draft at how we address next year's challenges and continue to deliver decent services. And I'll just say that as well as that, things around parking charges or whatever else, I think we've demonstrated in the past, particularly thinking about Brixworth Country Park and elsewhere, that where suggestions come forward about unforeseen consequences around the implementation of charges or certain uses of technology, then we will demonstrate flexibility to meet the needs of the local population. So we'll go through a budget scrutiny process. There's a consultation off the back of the paper tonight, and we'll listen to the feedback that comes our way. And if I'd encourage Arc Cinema to feed into that, because we want to hear the voice of local business. And I know Councillor Lister would be a receptive ear to their view on these changes. But I'll hand back to Councillor Longley now if he wishes to respond to any of the other points raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will. So a couple of points here that I thought, in Wendy's case, I thought I would look at 2 points in particular. The first one was on the car parking charges. And that's quite right. There were two areas where we put car parking, and they are both for social reasons. One's the racecourse, and the other one is across an area where there's a lot of social problems at the moment. So that's the purpose behind it. As far as the AMPR is concerned, that's a capital item, and it will have gone through a business case. And I think numbers you quoted, I'm not sure they're correct or not, but let's assume they are. There's 100,000 investment and 26,000 the first year. It's not going to stop in the second or third year, so it's a pretty good investment, I'd have said. But in any event, it will have gone through a business case. Spoke about unavoidable growth and 10% off that. Well, this is what you tend to do this every year because, I mean, we have quite an interesting little situation with the likes of Stuart here, Stuart there, and all these characters. Been around a long time. They know how to budget. And when asked, what do you want? You usually get a number. So then you go into discussions with them, and that's where that comes from. And that's the inevitability of it, of setting budgets. Never known it any different all the years I've been doing it anyway. Now, coming on to Ian's points there, I mean, it's depending on the situation at the 19th, and will it go for us? Won't it go for us? We've got to assume it won't. It will go neutral, and it means that next year with the NI and things like that, yeah, tricky, no doubt about that. And that's why the contingency, history's against us. Yeah, we know that. Of course it is, and that's quite right. Histories tell us that. But it wouldn't start from that point, but they have to, we'll use it. And hopefully we won't. Will we, won't we? Your view there? Yeah, well taken. But then we look at the situation of the AI, the millions that are in there. I think that's a very good item for scrutiny. I think that's an excellent item for scrutiny because there's these pilots going currently. I'm not sure where we are on them, whether they come in good, bad, and different. But that was the idea. You may recall we put some seed money down for this very purpose to see what happens and see where we went. And some will come through and some won't. Hopefully more come through than not. And that's so scrutiny is a very good way to look at that. Now you did speak about the children's increase was quite small. Yes, superficially it looks like that. Two items there that would come to mind. The first is there's 11 million worth of efficiencies that are baked in there. We hope that will happen. That's the houses for example. There are things like that. We should get that. But also, of course, we've now taken legal on board from Pathfinder, and there's a big cost saving there. So there's a number of items in there. It's not quite as difficult as it first looks. Still going to be tricky, no question about that. There you are. I think that I'd agree. Any budget at this stage when we've got increases coming in is at risk. We'll go through the consultation, we'll kick it around, and no doubt there'll be changes. And again, I said every year, and Matt reminded of anybody who's got any good ideas, we'd love to hear them. So so we'll see what the consultation brings up, and equally strongly what the government decides that we get. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Any more comments from Cabinet members? No. In which case, there's a rather lengthy list of recommendations at paragraph 3 of the report on page 91. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Still with Councillor Longley, item 10, the draft HRA budget and medium-term financial plan.
Just find my appropriate page. Yeah. Well, I think that Bob's spoken about this already. I think I think it's probably the same thing you've spoken about. What we have here is the recommendations. You can see. Let's start with the increases that are there. We're talking about the cost of rental increases 2.7, and it says what the average rents are. That's item 2, the recommendations, and also the garages and leaseholders and so on. So that's the key point here. But I also think that you've got to sort of look at really I'd look to page 203, which is table 1 of the HRA budget. That really sort of sums it up as best we can. And the key to this will be the repairs and maintenance budget. That's 19 million, more or less the same as we did this year. And it's getting the biggest bang for the buck that we can get there, because that's the key to it. The rents, you can see what they're going to be, and that's the big number. And we all know that we're having a major review at the moment on this area, and the idea is to improve it and decide where we go forward in the future. So I'm not going to dwell too much on it, because I think it's all in in the report. There's the right to buy is reducing. That's an interesting observation there, and I think that you just work through it. It's fairly straightforward other than that, and but I think the key to this will be getting the scale of the builds in on the capital side of things, and also on the repair side, sticking to that budget, but getting a bigger bang for the buck. So, thank you, Chair. I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you. 2 speakers for you on this one, Malcolm. Councillors Purser and Randall.
Right, I'll try and speak to the right item this time. I think the experience this year on the revenue budget it's been quite bumpy, and I guess the part of the issue is the whole cladding issue and sorting that out, and that's obviously had quite an impact this year, along with the increase in maintenance costs, which have been significant. And I think, I think getting this year's budget to balance will be quite an achievement, and there'll be, I think, much appreciation for all the work that's gone into making that happen. I suppose looking forward, I suppose next year, I am concerned. Well, I've got the issues are complicated, because we've got this cladding issue that's come in, which is likely to throw all the budgets out of kilter, it seems to me, because there needs to be ongoing investment in the sort of long-term improvements to housing that needs to go on. And my concern is that the cladding issues will mean that we can't do that long-term investment to the extent that we want to. I suppose my third point is about we're not good at delivering the new housing. And now that a substantial chunk of that has been brought in-house, can that really lead to improved delivery of new social housing? And I think really we would expect that bringing that much more in-house, we should improve the performance there. And I suppose that's a real challenge that should happen, because we've been slipping stuff forward for years and years, and we've got to start actually delivering rather than slipping programs forward. So those are my kind of comments on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It states in 5.6 right to buy has fallen significantly over the last couple of years. And I'm just wondering if you're expecting to see a sharp increase or any sort of increase in that now that legislation has been changed. Mine's similar to Bob's. I noticed that the new build figure, I just wondered if the 24 million replacement of cladding is coming out of that new homes budget. And, you know, we talk about what's happening nationally, and I just wondered if you've had all 4 MPs in the room at the same time, Adam, because I think that's what I'll be doing, and getting them all singing from the same song sheet and, you know, banging the drum, you know, but regardless of whether they're in different parties, I mean, they should all be speaking up and making a case for us. So, you know, that's what I'd like to see all 4 of them doing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure which specific issue you're referring to, Wendy, but I do meet with all 4 MPs. You know, there's one initial meeting that I'm still waiting for, but that will happen towards the end of January with Mike Reeder. Just going back to the point about right to buy, for November, ahead of the deadline, we saw an extremely sharp increase in the number of right to buy applications, so well beyond what I would have anticipated. I think compared to the comparable period for over the last 6 years or so, it was in excess of 13 times the highest number that we'd seen. So there's clearly been a rush to beat the deadline. I have asked that officers make sure that our fraud checks are as robust as they can possibly be to make sure that there's no gaming of the system taking place, and that all of those applications are valid, because that's all that we can do under the circumstances. But yeah, a very, very sharp increase, which makes me ask questions, and I've asked the questions. So but you know, always happy to meet with any of the MPs. I met with Stuart Andrew this morning. Lucy Rigby's got a constant dialogue with both the chief executive and myself, so that, you know, all 4 are communicating in different ways and forms. And obviously, I did go out with Mike Reeder in the wake of the floods last month to meet with residents and to meet with the Environment Agency as well. So, you know, they're all liaising with us in their own way. I think with 4 MPs, you know, but Lucy now with her responsibilities as Solicitor General, to get them all in the same room at the same time is challenging. But you know, if there's a specific issue that would need the support of all 4 of them, I wouldn't hesitate to make that request of them. So, Chief Executive.
Thank you. It was just to pick up the point about the sort of asset investment. So just a couple of things. One, which we talked about full council last week, we've obviously got some senior officers, including one of the deputy 151s working with MPH at the moment around the HRA and the balances and the split of capital and revenue. And that's so far as having a really positive effect in essence, because we don't believe they've been putting the right things to capital. And so that's actually improved their sort of financial outlook from that point of view. But key to all that planning as well, of course, is we've got a decent home standard. So regardless of what we have to do with cladding, we have to maintain those standards and those homes in that way. And there's a very detailed piece of work going on alongside that. And we will be bringing the MPH asset management plan specifically to one of these meetings or council meeting, so that you can see that. And obviously that sets out the longer term view about making sure the estate's fit for purpose, which I think is quite key.
Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points there. Just first of all, I'll turn to Bob there. That the balance of this year, we're 450. The forecast is 450 overspend at the moment. It'd be very surprising we couldn't balance that by the end of the year. There'd have to be something pretty bad coming down the track for that not to be able to be this far out. So I wouldn't be too worried about cladding. As a general rule, would be not always, but as a general rule, would be capital, of course. So that, and if you pointed out by Martin here on page 223, appendix 3, line 1 and line 3, there's two references. It doesn't say cladding, but it's external improvements and structural works. there's an 8 million and a 6 million. It's some of that would go towards it. So there's money there. But the broader point here is if we put big capital sums into anything, be it cladding, no matter it's bound to impact the situation because it impacts the borrowing. So therefore something else has to give. Doesn't come from nowhere. Or you increase the borrowings, and we've spent quite a few years now making sure we don't do that. We keep it so that we can have the money when we want to do the houses, for example. We were able to do that because of what we've done in previous years. And so it's always a balancing act, and that would come into that balancing act. And you always got more projects, or you should have more projects than you got money. That's always the case, and that's where we're bound to be. So it will be capital, and it's got to be done. Certain cases, as Anna's just said. So yes, it's something else on the capital side will give, not necessarily in housing. It can be something else. So it's a balancing, and and the best case always wins. Well, hopefully so anyway. So that answers that one, I think. Right to buy. Yeah, I think there will be short-term increase there, and you would expect that to be the case, and we'll see where that one goes. But not much we can do about that. We'll have to take it on the chin. So thanks, Chair. That's about all I got to say there, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. With no one else indicating to speak, I'll draw members' attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2 of the report. There are 6 of them. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on then to the corporate plan performance report. Just finding the right page, but bear with me. So this is our usual quarterly performance report set out in the format previously agreed off the back of feedback at corporate scrutiny and from members in this forum. There have been some slight tweaks to certain categories. I believe leisure centres have been moved finally from green and clean to a more appropriate setting. So Councillor Harris will be happy. Under green and clean, I'd just highlight the fact that there was an increase in the number of fly tips cleared in the last quarter. Now, members can see that as a positive or a negative. It may, whether they view that as more fly tips or a greater efficiency of the teams, but I think it does demonstrate that we are being very active in getting rid of litter on the street. I know it's something that particularly exercises residents and councillors alike, but we do have hugely hard-working teams doing their utmost to cope with that particular issue. Improved life chances. We are seeing now a slight uptick in the proportion of cases where homelessness was successfully relieved. Still not where we want it to be, still short of the target, but that's something that the team is working hard as the restructure of the department and the changes in approach embed within the service. Picking out some further highlights, if we go over to connected communities, there's been a significant increase in the percentage of the routine maintenance budget spent to date, but you'd expect that as we approach the half-year point, we're just shy of 50% of the budget having been spent, and I believe that also incorporates the additional spend that we've factored in. So the team's doing well in progressing through the budget allocated to them and making improvements to the roads throughout West Northamptonshire. Thriving villages and towns. We did see an above target number of affordable homes completed in the last quarter. Sadly, only 2 new council homes built, but of course we have now, had our launch of our affordable homes delivery plan, our housing summit, and we're seeking to progress our relationship with those companies and partners who can deliver the quantity of affordable housing, and including social housing, that we need in West Northamptonshire in the years ahead. It remains an absolute priority of the council, and the low numbers in recent quarters are a disappointment to us. I just highlight under economic development the number of apprentices employed in substantive roles in WNC. We've got I'll just highlight a relatively new apprentice in the exec support team who's supporting the cabinet, doing a great job. Who's only 17 years of age, but has sort of launched into the job with a massive amount of enthusiasm and is learning at the rate of knots. And we've shown in over the short history of WNC that people can go from entry-level jobs to really responsible roles within the organisation. We'll support people on that career path, and it's important that we practice what we preach in terms of economic development and companies outside of the council supporting young people through apprenticeships. So we're absolutely doing that as an organisation. Across our priority 6, the financial side of things under robust resource management, good performances all round, I have to say, and kudos to our Revs and Bens team, the finance team, and all those involved. Struggle to pick out a particular highlight because they're doing well pretty much across the piece, but those are the highlights for me, and happy to move on to questions and comments from colleagues. We've just got, we've got Sally as a late entry, but first of all, Councillor Purser and Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general point is that I hope that cabinet members do go through these reports in detail with directors, because we can't at a cabinet meeting really do justice to every section in the detail that they really deserve. So I think that would be one general question to you, leader, as leader, about how these are really used. I just want to pick up 4 specific things. You referred to the homelessness prevention target. We've either got the target wrong or we're delivering it wrong. It seems to me that having something that is so far adrift from what we ought to be delivering suggests that there is something not right there, and we either need something that we're going to achieve, or maybe this needs to go back to the drawing board. I don't know. I'll leave that to Rosie to look at, really. I've clearly misunderstood the MASH figures, I think, from the Chief Executive's comments, because they look positive, but perhaps they aren't as positive as I think they are. But really, perhaps that can just be clarified, because we're certainly, I think, I've been to briefings where the aim is that we have fewer referrals into the MASH, and that the MASH referrals are better quality and more relevant and needing to be dealt with. And it would be really good if they were, and I'd be really sad if what appears to be progress isn't. So that's my second one. The third, just picking up the falls data, that seems to be going in the wrong direction there. And that's got to be one of our key indicators that we're doing prevention work with older people, that people aren't getting into hospital with falls. So just to ask what might be going on there. And my fourth point was about the EHCPs, where again, we were hoping that we'd be making progress on that, and we seem to be going back again. So just wonder whether whether I'm misunderstanding that figure as well, because that seems to be my lot for this evening. But just to ask, are we going forward or are we going backwards on that? So those were my 4 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Chair. Only 16% of cases was homeless prevented, and we've got a target of 50%. So I just wondered what the issue was there. And homelessness, you know, as we know, we're going to see a huge increase in that, I think. There were a few families outside the Guildhall today with all their belongings, and they were from private rentals that the landlords, I assume before legislation comes in, are deciding to evict these families. And, you know, I don't know what we're going to do, but it's a major issue that we're going to have going forward. EHCPs, obviously, you know, there was significant amount of new staff coming on board. In the previous report, we had requested 390 EHCPs, and completed in 20 weeks was 28.1. And in this quarter, it's gone down for requests and also down in completed. So I just wanted to understand that, have we still got the same amount of staff in, or have we had staff come in and staff leave, or are they significantly taking longer to pull all these EHCPs together? I was going to mention Falls, but Councillor Purser has covered that. Only 55% customer satisfaction rate for customer services. I assume that's probably going to be waiting times, because that's the complaint that I get, and I've phoned myself, and it isn't great. 53% of complaints were upheld. 2 new council homes built. What percentage of planned council housing is WNC now responsible for? And great to see that visitors to museums is higher than expected, because it is a fantastic museum. And on average, 67 days to determine new housing benefit or council tax reduction, and on a target of 20 days. So, you know, that's triple. And I just wonder when we're going to see, you know, because that is a significant concern and worry to our residents. So thank you.
And Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, really, going over what the last councillor was saying about the proportion of cases for homeless prevention is quite low against the 50 target. It would be better if it was a bit higher. And the same with the 26.1 for proportion of cases homeless successfully relieved. The one I'm looking at, though, I'm really more serious about, because I'm on children's scrutiny, is the amount of children that are permanently excluded from school. We've got 5 primary school children permanently excluded from school. I mean, that's children under 11. And also secondary school, there's 11 children there. But the suspension from school is 129 primary and 757 secondary for suspensions from school. What's happening, you know, with our children? And that's really a concern. And I have asked if we could do a piece of work with it on children's scrutiny, but I haven't had the answer back from the chair yet. I have to point out that it's, when you think of how many people we've got in temporary accommodation and how many people losing, to only build 2 council houses in a target that has no target. It has a previous period was 5. So that's 7 council houses. And how many people have we got in temporary accommodation now and people on the waiting list? 104 affordable houses. That's a little better figure, but basically it's such a shame. If people saw this, they would just give up hope, you know, and that's what we don't want to do with people. We want to give them hope and to know that their lives can be better. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris has promised that this is one very quick question, so I'll hold him to that.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me. Yes, it's just a really quick one. He may recall back at Cabinet meeting, I think probably around September time, it was certainly at the point when the budget announcement, or probably prior to the budget announcement, the discussion about winter fuel allowance being removed. And I remember Councillor Hallam saying that there'd been a spike in call numbers related to that. And the conversation at the time was, because I asked specifically, could we have a look at what that spike looked like? And the conversation at the time was that it wasn't the right time. It's difficult to see from these figures, given that it's period 7, whether or not we can see any trends in here. So can I ask specifically whether we can actually see that data or get access to that data? We're all working really hard in our communities to try and promote pension credits and such like, and any other things that are available. And it would be really interesting to see whether or not that spike has come through in terms of contact.
Thank you. I've made a note. We collect the data, so we'll make sure that that's shared. So I'm just going to go around the room in a friendly fashion and get some answers to as many of those questions as possible. So I'll start off with Councillor Golby.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the falls, I'd actually flagged the performance as positive because I think if you look at the figures, it's a year-to-date figure, therefore it's cumulative. And if you look at the trend line, which is the white line, that indicates that it's generally sort of held its own and actually decreased. And if you look at the commentary at the bottom, it says comparing to the same point last year, there's been a decrease of 24 admissions over the same period. So I know it's sometimes difficult to get your head round, but I'll get a bit of clarification through Stuart through Stuart, just to make sure that my interpretation is correct, which I think is right. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Hopefully I can answer a few of them that were raised actually. So the mass referrals, sorry, yeah. So the numbers in are down, as I heard, I think Councillor McCord say to you, they are quite seasonal. So you will get some things that go up and down with school times and holidays, for example. We always get a surge after them, we get a drop after that, etc. So they're doing a lot of improvement to try and avoid, with thresholds and everything, to avoid that. I suppose the point I was making is referrals going in terms of conversion, and then children care is not going down yet. It's stable, but it's not going down, and that's probably the key thing. But we're doing a lot of work with partners to bring those down. In terms of homelessness and prevention, I think it's a really good point. I think one of the things we've talked a lot about it recently is we're probably trying to prevent it too late in the process. And going back to some of the exciting things that happen around AI and technology, the work we're doing on predictive analytics is what we found is most homelessness cases, actually, the very first sign of them will be something, for example, discussed in children's, where the talk of the loss of a home might be mentioned, but from a social care point of view isn't relevant, but is relevant as a risk of homelessness. And so the work we're doing will start to pick up these triggers much, much earlier so that we move the prevention earlier. And I think Jane would say our challenge then is how do you move the staff who are dealing with the if you like, the back end of that to the front end to do it, which we'll need to work through. But we are trying to do as much as we can to get in earlier. And that's the problem why it looks poor, as I think, as a figure. EHCPs, our challenge there is at the same time the numbers went up again in terms of volume in. So the percentage we achieved in 20 weeks looks lower because the number came in was bigger. That said, for the first time ever last month, we saw the figure below 100 in the month. And that's the first time for as long as we've been in existence, it's been below 100. So maybe we're starting to see some change there. Exclusions, I think we'd all say absolutely there's a focus. One of the biggest problems with exclusions, sadly, is children with EHCPs and SEND and behaviours. And part of the money we invested that was referenced is absolutely about what we call special teachers and teaching assistants who are now going out to the schools from us to work with them to keep the children in school and make sure that they've got the right support early enough before things escalate, because the danger is then exclusion becomes the only thing. And realistically, in terms of a child's outcome, no child should be excluded who's got SEND because their life chances are thoroughly affected. So absolutely on our radar as a priority.
Thank you very much. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. So first, just to concur that Matt's description around the falls is accurate. It is cumulative, and if you look at the commentary, it is marginally better performance than we saw last year. Just to add to the Chief Executive's commentary around the HCPs, one of the issues which causes that, not just the increase in demand, but the busyness in the service, was the public response to the inspection report being published. I think, if I recall correctly at the time, we put our hands up to say we were likely to see an increase in complaints, an increase in requests for support, as the public's understanding of where we were as an authority started to become clear. Again, just to concur with the Chief Executive, we have seen that level of stability start to play through around the HCP demand for the first time in a considerable period. Equally, just on the MASH referrals, whilst there has been a reduction, it's worth pointing to the commentary which further highlights that the vast majority of those referrals coming in have no further action. If we can do better at signposting children and families to services within their local communities, our MASH has more capacity to focus on those children who actually require a safeguarding response. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for the benefit of the webcast, your formal title is the Executive Director of People Services, which I should have said. Our 151 officer, are you able just to respond to our progress that we're making in terms of housing benefit claims and the processing times?
Yeah, sure, Chair. So the performance in benefits isn't what we'd expect to see. We want it to be better than that. I think what is important, though, if you turn to page 260 of the pack, you can see the direction of travel and the performance in the first quarter for housing benefits and CTRS. New claims was 73.79 days on average. That's improving, so it's 67.63 now. So it's an improvement. It's not where we want it to be. We know that performance is as a result of the change in the system we brought in, where we've harmonised the system, and we're beginning to see the benefits of that. We won't have that recovered by year end, but it's important to highlight that the direction of travel is positive and in the right direction. And the same comment applies to the change of circumstances. So again, if you look at the quarter one position, that's 21.43 days. And if you look at the quarter two position, it's 19.7 days. So again, not where we want it to be, but a move in the right direction, which we expect to continue for the rest of this year. And then we'll see the full benefit of it next year.
Thank you very much. I'll just respond to Councillor Beardsworth's comments about council houses. Unavoidably, it is our ambition to build more council houses. They're not the only means of taking people off the housing register. The affordable homes that are being built by our partners, are another means of delivering on that particular front. So the fact that registered providers are still able to build at a reasonable rate is of some consolation. What I would also add is that, as we've seen recently, we don't currently have a delivery partner for social housing that can be relied upon to deliver what we need to deliver. So that's a work in progress, as demonstrated at the Housing Summit through the Affordable Housing Delivery Plan at the last Cabinet meeting. I hope that sets out the scale of our ambition and the commitment that this council has to delivering council houses, social housing at the level that is required to meet those needs. I'll just go around the Cabinet just in case anyone has any particular areas that they wish to highlight from their particular portfolios. Councillor Golby, I know, does have a couple of areas he wishes to pick out.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add that, obviously, despite a large amount of demand that we've talked about, there are some good solid areas of performance around adult social care. I just wanted to pick out particularly the older people who are still at home 91 days after discharge from hospital. So across the second quarter, as it states, of this year, there's been a significant improvement in performance with 82.8% achieved. This takes the performance for the year to 78.9%, which is similar to the target for the year. So I think despite the demand, that's very good performance. And then also in just crossing over briefly to public health and infants due a new birth visit within 14 days, and then the 6 to 8 week review. There's some very good performance that sort of tracks significantly over national targets. So I just wanted to highlight those. There's a number of others in there, but some good solid performance from within the directorates. Thank you.
any other cabinet members wish to add anything? Councillor Breeze?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment on the fly tips cleared. I think it's horrifying that we have so many fly tips to clear. I mean, 20,000 a year is just an appalling number, and it's something that Cabinet are very aware of, and we are discussing how we tackle it, because I think that this number that our anybody in the community thinks it's acceptable to this extent to fly tip, or to any extent to fly tip, is just outrageous. And it's something that really concerns me.
Thank you. Just one last comment from me. Councillor Purser, I believe, asked about how we use the KPIs and this report. So the scorecard that you see, and as well as this report, has gone over in great detail outside of this meeting, but by cabinet members, both individually and collectively. So it is something that we constantly review, and iteratively, as at the appropriate point in the year, we also review the relevance of the different KPIs and whether they still have a relevant place in the report. So with that, we'll move to the single recommendation, which is to note the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We move on then to item 12, which is modernising the meeting room audio visual equipment. This is Councillor Hallam's portfolio, but in his absence, I'll present the paper. Only to say that we currently have some AV equipment that was inherited from predecessor authorities, and in many of our buildings that's out of date. It's not fit for purpose for the level of webcasting and democratic transparency that we wish to deliver for members of the public who may not be able to make it into the building. And furthermore, we also need to collaborate with stakeholders, partners from outside of the organisation in having remote meetings and the like, so that we can be an effective council in the modern age. So it's proposed that we refit a number of meeting rooms with modern equipment to allow staff, tenant organisations and third parties to work more seamlessly. And there is a proposed capital investment that's set out at item 7 in the paper. It's, I believe, a fairly straightforward proposition in front of us. It's all about making us fit and proper for the modern age. And at that, I'll take Councillor Randall's comments or questions.
Thank you, Chair. I've only one plea, really, as we're investing so much money, is whether Cabinet would consider streaming more of our public meetings. I think it would be really good to have scrutiny streamed, and so to show that we're, open and transparent. So that's why my plea to you as leader in Cabinet. Thank you.
Yeah, no objections whatsoever to that. I think at the moment the limitation is the venue and the streaming equipment for some of the meetings. So we've had problems with some of it in the past. So yeah, we'll make sure that that's factored in once the modernisation is complete. So simple. Any further comments from members of the Cabinet? No, thank you. So recommendations at paragraph 3. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Councillor Breeze then for item 13, the adoption of the trees and wood strategy.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to present to Cabinet the trees and wood strategies for adoption. The strategy outlines the state of woodland cover in our district, from the urban areas to the rural countryside. I was rather surprised to learn that existing canopy cover in West Northamptonshire is lower than average at 9% versus an average of 14% across England. Our vision set out in the strategy is to increase this cover to 20% in the next 20 years. Trees have an important societal well-being and health benefit, as well as contribution to the mitigation of changing climate patterns. And WNC has a pivotal role in increasing the number of trees and therefore canopy cover, as the owner of trees and woodlands across the district, and where it has regulatory or other supportive roles for other stakeholders. This strategy's first steps covers the next 5 years as we consider the care, management and provision of more trees. It then steers future policies for caring for trees, woodlands and hedgerows in the years thereafter. Before work on the strategy began, there were workshops for town and parish councils, drop-in sessions for the public, as well as online consultations. This informed priorities and therefore development of the strategy. Following publication of the draft, further consultation took place from September to October with further workshops, drop-in sessions and consultations. Following consideration of the responses, we now have the draft strategy before Cabinet. The strategy includes several appendices which cover in detail various areas covered in the main draft. It details the consultations that informed how the strategy developed and the most recent consultation on the draft itself. Other appendices cover areas such as methodology in calculating canopy cover. There's a trees FAQ for residents, how the strategy links with other council priorities, an action plan, and a commitment to develop and publish a tree management plan for 2025, which will detail how we manage our trees from a technical standpoint, and a right tree for the right place strategy to be completed in the next few months to guide the selection, planting and care of trees for both WNC and other stakeholders. So, Chair, I'd like to recommend to Cabinet the adoption of the strategy as outlined in 3.1 of the Cabinet report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 registered speakers on this item, Councillors Harris, Purser and Randall.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, if I may, on this. Obviously, having seen the evolution of the strategy as it's been put together, in principle, as a document and as an aspiration, there's not a lot to dislike about it. But that's probably my overarching concern, actually, is that it's a very grand plan and fundamentally has no funding behind it. There's a very heavy reliance on third parties and relationships and connections within our area. So that has to be a fundamental question for me, that to have a strategy of this importance, because I think we all hopefully recognise the importance of trees in the context of air quality, climate change and such like. But we're not doing anything with it to fund it. And it talks in the report under 7.11 that advice received is there sufficient funding sources out there. I think we should have that in the strategy if that's the case. Let's actually make sure we pin that down. Because I'm not convinced that without investment, things will happen. We see it continually on all of the items that we discuss regularly at this meeting and others. So that's my key point, really. My second point is that what happens in practice is actually also somewhat different. If you look at what happens when we get applications from planning in regards to trees removals, increasingly we see less and less detail about reasons for removals of trees. That's an item that's been picked up by a number of my parishes and fed into the system several times, but it hasn't changed. And we're asking parishes to look and make judgment or comment on issues relating to trees, and often they have no information really, other than a poor sketch and a poorly completed form. The worst thing about that, though, is that often they seem to be increasingly approved and granted and the trees are removed, but then we have no sense of where those trees have gone from. And that concerns me most in conservation areas, because conservation area, we do have a policy which exists right now, which is to replace. And again, I've asked in certain areas, conservation areas, repeatedly for where's the data, where have the trees gone from, how can we make sure we're monitoring those and insisting that they get put back. That's our policy. It's not fabricated, but you can't find it. It just doesn't exist. So we've got a flaw in the system. So it's great having this plan, but actually we can't even work out what's gone or what's been taken out at the moment, it seems to me. My third point is, I understand that we have lost our recently appointed tree strategy officer, which is of huge concern. I know that it took quite a long time to find him in the first place, and I don't think he's been in tenure very long, probably 6 months, 9 months maximum, I think. So I guess I've got lots of questions about why. having attracted an officer in with the experience that he seemed to bring, we've suddenly lost him already, and I'd welcome an answer on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the strategy, but it's a very lukewarm welcome, because it seems to me this is a kind of a strategy produced sort of by consultants. And we had an excellent scrutiny report at least 2 years ago with lots of specific questions and requests. I'm particularly concerned in this document with Appendix F, which is about tree management plans, which seems to have no funding attached to it in terms of how we're going to actually manage the trees that we really ought to be managing. I think the scrutiny challenged Cabinet as to whether you were going to go for bronze, silver or gold in terms of managing the trees. I think we've got clay here. You know, I think we're at the, you know, we really ought to be committing a kind of budget and where are our tree management priorities. We know the east side of Northampton has particular, for historic reasons, particular challenges in this area. And I think we ought to be bringing really a much more specific plan to Cabinet on this. So I think strategy is fine, but it needs delivering.
Councillor Randall has passed, so it's back to you, Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thank you for the comments. On Councillor Harris's points, I note his points, and I would say that particularly the aim is to utilise grants where and when they become identified and available, and we will go after them aggressively. What happens in practice? Well, this is a strategy to set out what happens in the future. It's not, there've been issues in the past, and this is looking to the future. It's a long-term strategy, and we've got to start somewhere. On the Paul Fountain, who was an excellent officer, he was engaged to write the strategy. That was his job, and he has now retired. So it's not a case of we've lost an officer. He had a particular function, and he's now chosen to retire. Now that we've got a strategy, it will be a different skill set involved in implementing it. On Councillor Purser's points, there is a budget for tree maintenance, and as appendix, I think was it J? Sorry, I can't remember which one it is. On the maintenance, the detail of that does have to be worked out, but there is a budget. However, as we've heard from Councillor Longley, if we increase the budget for our trees, as Councillor Julie Davenport specifically asked the Cabinet Council a couple of councils ago, can we increase the tree budget from 200,000? I think she said it was. Something else will have to give. So it's a balancing act. I think that answers the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to give assurance to members, I have asked the question of those parts of the strategy where specific plans are still to be developed. Those will come back to Cabinet to be looked at and approved, so that they have that democratic input that's required. It's not just going to disappear off into a dark corner to be written up. So we have that assurance. Are there any other comments from members? Executive Director for Place.
Just to add on what Councillor Bruce was saying in terms of funding, there are some people who we are partnering with, such as the Woodland Trust, which have significant grants that are given to them from central government to work alongside councils to actually develop woodland and forestry within the area. So that's where the significant funding that Councillor Breeze was referring to is already in the system. We're having those conversations, and I'm very confident that as Westwood Northants now, we've got a strategy, because that's one of the big questions that the grant funders request. Where's your strategy? What are you trying to do? And having ambitious totals like 20% cover as an ambition and a vision is something that will really bring forward that grants as we go forward. So I'm very confident we'll start to deliver on these. Very confident.
Thank you. Unless there are any other comments, then we'll move to the recommendations in the paper. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 14, we're back to Councillor Longley after a little rest. It's the Grosvenor Centre and Belgrave House agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, this is an agreement, a set of agreements. Those that have read it through, it's not straightforward, because there are 6 agreements is what we're looking for the go-ahead to negotiate the details around them. And but the principle behind it is that we're trying to bring Belgrave House back into a workable condition. At the moment, we're stuck with a building there for a very, very long lease, and there's very little we can do with it. It's so restrictive, the lease, that it's very difficult to do anything about it. This set of agreements here will enable us to bring it back into operation and into an income-producing area, and also a very worthwhile area in the middle of the town. So that's all I've really got to say on that, Chair. And I think Dan's probably going to have a word too as well.
I'll go to Councillor Lister first then.
Thank you, Chair. I think it should be saying that there's some other principles in this as well, in that we're securing a major retailer for the town to remain in the town, who would most likely have left had we have not secured this agreement to work with the Evolve Estates. We're also bringing workspaces into the town centre, which is much needed. We have a lack of office space within the town, which we're also delivering through this with the Agreement C, the WIZU offices. We're bringing in the old Sainsbury's building back into use through the leisure operator agreement, and of course Belgrave House, which forms part of the Greyfriars master plan as well. So although there are some headline numbers, and Malcolm very well and quickly went through the numbers and the principles, this is bringing a lot of areas back into use within the centre. And of course, micro shops as well, if we look at that, that's an incubator space for other retailers, small retailers who will develop and hopefully move into places like Abington Street and St Giles Street or elsewhere in our other towns to be able to develop the vibrancy of our town centre. So it's a very good agreement that brings forward lots of ambitions that we have for this area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. 3 speakers on this one, Councillors Beardsworth, Purser and Randall. Sally?
Thank you, Chair. I must admit I was quite shocked when I read this report. I just couldn't believe that we are actually getting a very small rent of £2 a year for the Grosvenor Centre. Is that correct? It's in the report. It's correct then. I'm not reading this wrong. Yeah. So £2 a year, and yet we charge our libraries that are independently run now, 15, 16, 17,000 pounds a year to run the library. Our libraries have been proven to be very successful. 285,000 visitors for the libraries that you run.
Sorry, Sally, this paper isn't about libraries.
No, I'm just pointing out there's a
Yeah,
difference.
and it's been pointed out.
For the Grosvenor Centre and those for libraries. I know. But also, can I also say with this, if Sainsbury's took a 100-year lease out in 1974, surely the lease should run till 2074. Are we not being paid for that lease still? That's another question, okay? And the other point I was going to make, if I can find it, she says, with you're going to give 2 million to H&M Agreements, is that correct? To provide 2 million for support of a centre subjected to due diligence, obviously. But their gross profits last year were 2.2 billion, 2.2 billion, and yet we're giving them 2 million. I just can't understand it. Belgrave House has always been a problem. I don't know why the borough took it on, but it did. And it's going to be a problem to solve as well. So I really do have concerns there. But I just, you know, when you read these things that we're giving to a shopping centre that charges quite high rents to people, and we're letting them have it for £2 a year, and yet other places which could do with more help, i.e. libraries, they don't get the help they deserve, I don't think. And with children nowadays becoming non-verbal and not reading when they're going to school, libraries are an essential, especially in deprived areas. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I think there's a couple of misunderstandings in those comments, but we'll come back to Councillor Longley to clear those up. Councillor Purser.
Thank you, Chair. I had a briefing from Summer Bowers about this paper because on first reading, it's a surprising document, but I can understand in the detail how it all hangs together. The thing that I just want to raise and question is, how did we end up signing a 999-year lease for Belgrave House, or our predecessor authority? What on earth was going on? I mean, really, I mean, you know.
Wendy, are you speaking?
Thank you, Chair. This report just didn't sit comfortably with me at all. £2 a year rent. Could you pay more than that on a little market stall on a, you know, once a week? It just seems, I don't know. I haven't got enough information. It just seems bizarre, actually. And yeah, I don't know what to say about it. I've never seen anything like it. I'm really uncomfortable about it.
Thank you, Chairman. At the start of WNC period, we all thought it would be NCC legacy issues that would cause us the most angst. And it would actually appear it's NBC legacy issues that are causing us the most angst and the most intractable problems that need to be looked at. Now, I'm not happy about any of this report. I do not believe that it is the job of WNC to be providing loans to private sector retailers, and particularly global operators with billions of pounds of turnover. That is just not what we should be doing. And of course, it always happens to be Northampton. Are we going to be doing this for retailers in Towcester, Daventry, Brixworth, Brackley, name the village? I just don't think that we need to be doing it. And I hardly need to be saying to anybody that local government in general do not have a very good history with loans to the private sector, and I don't mean cobblers. I just mean in general. You know, you can look at other authorities in other places, and they're all really getting into trouble. There seems to me to be a great thing now where 30, 40 years ago, you couldn't have got a piece of retail from the owners. And now they're queuing up to give them away because they see the local authorities as some sort of sucker sitting the other side of the table, trying to ride to the rescue of all of these things as retail shifts. So I'm not very comfortable with any of this. I do have real concerns as well, because I noticed in the report that it says that we intend to pass through the loan at the same rate at which WNC would be borrowing, or whatever the costs were to WNC. Now that raises in my mind a state aid or kind of issue, because if we can borrow from PWLB at a much more attractive rate of interest than you would get with commercial borrowing, that is in itself a subsidy, and we would need to be extremely careful. So I don't see anything mentioned in there around state aid and things like that. And I do actually think this needs a lot more thought and a lot more scrutiny.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Longley and maybe the 151 officer to cover off some of those queries.
I think that, where's Wendy? I can't see her now. Oh, there you are. Bazaar is correct. What this is, one of the very first things what Martin and myself had a discussion, and going back a few years now, was to make the point that we are not a bank. We're not a bank, we're a local authority. And I completely agree with what Ian was saying there. Never do it. What we have here is an extraction and a method of extraction from what's a very intractable problem. And it's a legacy thing. Everybody said, well, you know, why would you do this? Why would you do that? We didn't make any of these decisions. We're trying to extract ourselves from what was a bizarre arrangement. And this is currently where we stand on that extraction. Now, behind all this, and it says it, but it's very important, is the due diligence side of it. And when we talk about state aid, good point that, Ian, and that's got to come out in the due diligence. And this has got a long way to go yet, this report. What we're looking for today is agreement to go ahead with this or something very similar to it, to extract ourselves from the situation and put that all that real estate into proper and good use. At the moment, it's not. It's a waste of space. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, just to add to that, so I agree with all the comments that Councillor Longley's just made. I think it is all about the due diligence now. So we're looking for delegated authority here to go in and go into a bit more detail and make sure that we're happy with the arrangements. 2 points are key to that. One is the level of security we have on any loan, if we do offer a loan. And the second one is the point that's been raised by Councillor McCord about the state aid or subsidy control issue, which we need to understand in detail and then make recommendations back on that.
Yeah, and I'd only just add that there seemed to be a misconception in some of the comments that the loan was to H&M. That's not the case. The party being lent the money would be Evolve. And a couple of comments also about the £2 annual rent at the Grosvenor Centre, again, as set out in the report. That was an agreement with the Borough Council under their very, very long lease. So, you know, beyond our control, not something that we agreed to. I was 7 in 1992, so I deny all culpability on that front. I'd also just add that I think I had some of the same reservations that some of my opposition colleagues have set out when I first read the paper. But after a very long probing conversation with the Assistant Director for Assets, my mind was put at ease by just the level of security being sought for the loan. You couldn't mitigate the risk anymore, in my view. This is if it were a case of lending a retailer £2 million from the public purse. This paper wouldn't be before us today. I would have killed it at inception. But I think, given the intractability of the problems around Belgrave House and the mess that was created around that particular lease, and as the Assistant Director for Assets is fond of saying, we are closer to in historical terms to the Battle of Hastings than we are to the end of that lease. To extricate ourselves from that lease requires some manoeuvring, and this is not only a solution to that problem, but also a proposal that brings together a lot of benefits that Councillor Lister has outlined. And Councillor McCord said about he didn't actually mention the phrase Northampton centric, although thematically maybe he was going in that direction. If we were to get a proposal this robust in anywhere else in the district, we would absolutely go for it, because we're equally committed to every town and every village across the district. It just so happens that there's a lot more economic activity happening in Northampton, which makes up 55% of the population of West Northamptonshire. But we've supported the likes of Mercedes in Brackley. We've supported companies in Daventry and Towcester throughout our tenure. Not to this extent maybe, but we have given them logistical support, and we've encouraged them to come to West Northamptonshire and set up business, and we'll continue to do so, because it certainly isn't just about Northampton, but Northampton needs to be the economic hub of West Northamptonshire, and it needs to be successful in order for West Northamptonshire to be successful. Malcolm, Martin, any further comments from yourselves?
No, said it all, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so there is an extensive list of recommendations under paragraph 3. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, item 15. In order to consider item 16, I need to move that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, on the grounds that if the public were present, it would be likely that exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act would be disclosed to them. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. And I apologise, but I need to ask them